What's up, everybody? Tony's Topics. I got a great guest for you today, Pastor Peter Ahn of Metro Community Church in Englewood, New Jersey. He has a great new book out called The Weak Church, and I almost done reading it, and I wanted to have you on. Pastor Peter, thanks for coming on to Tony's Topics.
It is so great to be here. For those who don't know, Anthony and I go way back. I met him in fifth grade. So we go way back. So it's a blessing and a privilege to be with you. And I call him Ace. I don't call him Anthony. Usually I call him Ace.
Yeah, you're the only person that calls me Ace. May more people call me Ace because
it's stuck. It's sticky. So it sticks. Yeah.
Oh man, I get so many other names that I'm called that I can't say, but I'll take Ace. So no, listen, when you wrote the book, The Weak Church, and I'll put it up on the screen, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna read it. Pastor Peter's my friend, and I went into it with like, it's for pastors. You wrote the book for pastors. Well, 3 pages in, I'm like, wait a second. This book has to do with me, with everybody, because it's more than just for pastors. It's for how to have better, really, connections in life with friends, with family. So your book really supersedes just for pastors. So I was like, okay, I like this. This is good. So it was a pleasant surprise, because I thought it was just kind of like an industry book for pastors. And it really is, but it really is not. So, so absolutely. Before I forget, what's that?
No, absolutely. You're right. You're spot on that.
Yeah. So before I forget, though, where can people purchase the book?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. If you just go to Amazon and type in The Weak Church and type in my name, Peter Ahn, you can access it there. It's probably the easiest way to do it. My publishing company is Bloomsbury. You can get it on their website as well if you want. It will probably be maybe like $1 cheaper, but then you got to pay for shipping. So I encourage you to get it on Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well said. Okay, cool. So now I got a couple of questions, but I guess my first one is like, why write this book at this time? Like, you could have written a bazillion other topics about a bazillion other things, but why about, showing weakness as it can make strength and as it pertains to pastors? Like, why write this book?
Yeah, I really think the reason why I wrote the book was because I think there's a real big crisis that's happening in the church today. And for those who don't know, 1 million Gen Zs leave the church in the US of A every year. And so this is sort of a pandemic that's happening right now. And a lot of pastors are trying to figure out why. How do we get them back? And what they don't realize, what I write in the book is just that, Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas, these young people, they're looking for something real. They're looking for a place where they can also be transparent but vulnerable, a place where they can trust their leaders. And there's been so much that young people will say, I don't trust leaders and I don't trust pastors anymore, because they'll see what the media does. Media does a terrible job of sort of creating a picture of what a pastor is, because they like to just share the stories of pastors falling as opposed to pastors doing some good stuff, because there are far more better pastors that are doing great work. But of course, they're going to show the stuff where people will click on it. It's like clickbait, right? So anyway, so it's really to address this problem of how do we reach people, especially those young people that are leaving the church? Because as you know, every church is getting older now. They're not getting younger, and it's been a huge problem. And so the reason why I wrote this book is because this is really the story of Metro. And it's my story because I don't feel like you've known me since fifth grade, Anthony, and you realize, sort of my background and so many different things. I don't have really what it takes to be a pastor. And I never believed I did. In fact, when God called me to do that when I was a senior in high school, I was like, I'll do it. But then I went to college and I was like, no, I can't do this. I just don't have the ability to be a pastor. I hate public speaking. I don't like reading. I don't like reading. So I'm like, I have ADHD. I didn't know I have ADHD, but I can't read because I can't keep focused when I read a book. I grew up with a very broken past, and I just felt like I don't have what it takes. But then there was a moment in 1997 when I kind of brought that up to God. Why would you want me to be a pastor? Because I felt like he was calling me back. I was at church, and I listed all the excuses of why I shouldn't be a pastor. And he said, well, that's why I'm calling you, because you can't do it. And you're going to need me in order to do this. And so it's really like my story, and over the years of how we've been able to build a church where our ministry philosophy is based on weakness, which is really synonymous with the word vulnerability. That's really what the weakness means. Yeah.
Interesting. And, there's a lot to unpack on what you just said. And I would say off the top of my head, as you're telling me this, I'm thinking about, look at all throughout human history, whether it's in stories in the Bible or not, but God or life has brought up people, women and men that rose to the top and were great, not because they were the most qualified. I mean, we could start off with We could start off with what do you call it? David and Goliath, right? I mean,
Right.
David was some scrub, but he was chosen. Or we could talk about, I'm going to be doing a show later on about you and I both love American football. Cam Scatterboo, the running back for the New York Giants, on paper, he should not be in the NFL. He's not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest, not the most muscular, but this guy steamrolls people, and people are afraid to tackle this. So here's a guy that really has no business being in the NFL, who now is one of the greatest so far. And so what you're saying is not uncommon. Oftentimes, I think we see people who, we just like, wow, how did she do that? How did he do that? So I think there's more in us than we realize, as per your story about yourself too. And maybe God sees things in us that we don't see.
Yeah, and it's so interesting what you're saying, because in the book I write about that there's this theological thread or synthesis in the Bible from Genesis to Revelations, where God often chooses the weakest of people to do extraordinary things, like Abraham and Sarah. Right. Abraham was 100 before they had their first biological child. Sarah was 90. I mean, menopause, like there was no Viagra back then. No way they could have a kid. Yeah. Moses was 85 years old, and he was... God tells him at 85 now to go back to Egypt where you're wanted for murder. And now you have a speech impediment, but I want you to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Why didn't God tell Moses to do this when he was living in the royal palace as a teenager, right? And then David and Goliath. David was just a young boy, and he decides to go fight this 9-foot man, Goliath, and he defeats him. Gideon, downsizing his army from 30,000 people to 300 men, to go up against a war against the country, the Amalekite nation of 130,000 soldiers. And then you think about Jesus, a 13-year-old virgin gives birth to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And there's a thread there. Why would God do this kind of miraculous thing? Because in order for God's strength to be perfected in us, the element of human possibility must be destroyed. When human possibility is in play, then God can perfect his strength in us. And so the weak church is not about claiming a defeatist mentality. It's about saying, I'm going to be weak, I'm going to be vulnerable so that God's strength can work through me. And I say it's always better to live life where God's strength is perfected in you, and to do ministry and to do anything in life when God's strength is perfected in you, rather than when you use your own strength, no matter what. So that's kind of the premise of the book.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. And I think as we get older, some of us realize that, in weakness is strength. And so that's what I'm learning as I get older too. And so now, okay, was there a specific moment in your life where being strong actually backfired and made you realize that showing weakness might be the real strength? Was there a particular moment in your life?
Well, so, when I first started the church, I'm a recovering shame addict, and I had a lot of shame. And when you grow up in a physically abusive home, you don't have the proper emotional faculties to figure out, why is my father hitting me? I didn't do anything wrong. And the only thing you can make sense as a child is, well, I guess there's something wrong with me. And so I grew up my whole life believing there was something really wrong with me. And so that shame is so different from guilt. Guilt tells you that you made a mistake, but shame tells you you are a mistake. And when you feel like you're a mistake, it's really huge. And so when I started Metro, even though I felt like I didn't have what it took to be a pastor, because I lived in that kind of shame, I wanted the church to be the largest church in the world. Like, that was my hope, because I needed to prove to myself and I needed to prove to others that I was successful. Like, I wanted to impress them. And so I worked really hard. And about year 5, I realized the church is not going to be the biggest church in the world. It's just impossible. I don't have what it takes. And I felt like a loser. And I just said, I never hated ministry more. And when God called me to be a pastor, I was actually working in the marketplace for 4 years before I went into ministry. It was such a gift. But in year 5, it had actually become a curse. And I didn't want to do it anymore. And Anthony, I said these exact words. I came out of a parking lot on a Sunday after like 10:30 p.m. at night, after doing just a long weekend of ministry. I said, I want to die. I don't want to live anymore. And at that moment, I knew something was wrong. Yeah. And that's when I hit that wall. And my elder said, you need to take some time off, 90 days, 3 months. You can't step foot in this church. We just want you to go and rest, and you need to figure this out because you're not in a good place right now. And so originally I said, I can't do that. If I do that, the church will die. Like they can't survive without me. And then they're like, we're not asking you, we're ordering you to do this.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And that first month of being away from the church, it was like going to rehab center. Like I was literally detoxing myself from ministry. I didn't know what to do myself. And then the second month, I just said, well, I'm not allowed to go to Metro, but I might as well go visit some churches. And so I went to Queens, and I went to a church where the pastor's name was Peter Scazzaro. And I don't think most of your listeners and audience may not know who he is, but he's a pastor in Queens, New York, and he wrote a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
I read the
picked
book.
up that book, and I literally felt like he wrote this book for me. And I said, I am so unhealthy. I need to grow. And that was really the beginning of when God started to do a deep work in my heart, and I had to deal with my shame. I had to deal with some healing in the past. And so that was the moment, year 5 of planning Metro, about 2009 is when it really hit me. And years later, as I've been in a healthier place and helping pastors along the way, I just said, I think I need to write this in a book form, hopefully so that it can be a resource for Christians, for anyone, but particularly for church leaders and pastors. And that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, again, a lot there. And, it's funny. I can only help but to think as you're speaking about that, I have friends who are rabbis. I have friends that are imams, and I have friends that are, I guess in the Hindu faith. And I wonder, they must be going through the same thing. Their flocks, their people. It must be so taxing when, the priest, the rabbi, the imam, they're everything. And that's great, but we're human. We're not God. And even God needed the 7th day to take a break. Who are we? We need more than one day. Yeah. So, you touch on something, and the running joke, as you know, I grew up Catholic. The running joke is a lot of Catholic priests are alcoholic. I wonder why. It's just a lot on somebody when you have to be everything all the time, everywhere. And I'm sure you see that. And I see that when I'm at church, and, everyone, that's great. Oh, Pastor Peter. But at the same time, you're a human. Right. And I think we project onto leaders like they're bulletproof. They can do any, whether you be a doctor, a police officer, a teacher, a nurse, a pastor. These are positions of power, but we forget you guys are humans too.
Yep. But, and the thing is that we've created this, like the clergy. We believe that we've created this image where we have to be the most spiritual person in our congregation. You don't. The book gives you permission that you don't have to have it all together. It's okay. Yeah. And there's a holiness. There's a true holiness to being vulnerable, to being open and honest with who you are. Right. And so that's really what the book talks about. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we see it in the Bible, right? Christ washed the feet of people. Here is God, the Almighty, creator of the universe, bending down, kneeling, cleaning the least of, it's just like, but I think we forget those are not just stories. I mean, this is something that is in everyday life, and we're called to do that. And so okay, my next question was, though, a lot of people hear vulnerability and they think like it means oversharing or looking weak. Where's the line between healthy vulnerability and just dumping on people?
Yeah, so I don't think you should be dumping on anyone. I don't think I think it's very unhealthy when you're being transparent or vulnerable. And in the book, I write about the difference between transparency and vulnerability. So young people love to be transparent, right? Because they just love sharing. They'll push their reels up on social media. They'll just share like what they're going through. And that's okay, but that's sort of like an end in itself. Vulnerability is different than transparency because it's about being transparent, but then you take it a step further where you welcome feedback. And that's the difference. You don't want to welcome feedback from strangers. So you don't go out and share this with everyone, but you want to be in relation with 1 or 2 people where you are doing this together. You're being vulnerable, you're getting feedback, but then they're being vulnerable and you're giving them feedback. Feedback is critical because how are we going to grow if we're not willing to give each other some feedback and share some truth and love with one another? It's so important that we sharpen each other. And that we say, I'm not going to grow in self-awareness by myself. Like if you don't have anyone that speaks some truth into you, how are you going to be able to grow in self-awareness? So I talk about in the book that it's so critical that a lot of times when people give feedback in our culture today, we take that as like, oh my God, why are you trying to hurt me?
Yeah.
Feedback is not bad. If you're a healthy person, it actually becomes a term of endearment. And that's what happens when you're healthier. So you can't be vulnerable to everyone, but you should be willing to be vulnerable to at least one or two people in your life where there's a reciprocal relationship where they're being vulnerable with you as well. And you're giving each other feedback and being accountable and helping each other to be better. Because we
Yeah.
need each other to be better. We can't be better on our own, but we need each other to be better. And so to keep each other accountable to do that, and that's kind of what the book entails, because I tell pastors, you can't do this, you can't build a weak church until you can first be vulnerable with one or two people. And I call those
Right.
soul brothers, soul sisters, but in the book I call it soul mates. And
Right.
so
Right.
it's
Right.
really important. Like a mate is a friend that you're going to share your soul with, where you're going to confess the darkest areas to your humanity. Your soulmates give you permission to be imperfect.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing because nobody is perfect. We're all broken people. But because we live in a world that's so obsessed with strength, we just don't feel like we can be who we are. And we're
Right.
good. We have strengths. But there's also things about us that's not good or that's not strong. But that's okay. That's part of who I am. And to deny
Right.
that part of who I am is to deny part of my humanity. And the book is like, you can't do that because that's a part of who
Right.
you are.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it, man. And I find that even for myself, when I'm upfront with people about, hey, I'm scared about this or I'm worried, I'm not coming at it like, oh, look at me, I'm weak. I'm just saying, hey, I got a concern. Or, hey, you know what? Look, as you know, I coach tennis and I tell my kids, I go, listen, I want you to mess up. I go, Coach Anthony messes up all the time. I go, it's good to mess up. I start off with lessons like that. I want them to know, like, it's okay. And I want you learn by weakness. You learn by messing up. So when I set that stage, the lessons go like butter. And same thing for humans, adults, right? It's just, hey, it's okay. But like you said, you got to lead and say, I've messed up. I, have fallen. But a lot of pastors or priests don't do that, unfortunately. And so hopefully they can learn that from you, from this book.
And Anthony, that's one of the reasons why the latest statistics say that 42% of clergy are thinking about quitting in America today because they're struggling so much. And 18% of senior pastors, senior clergy in 2025 have contemplated taking suicide, suicide ideation. They have contemplated taking their own lives. That's almost 1 out of every 5 senior leaders in the church have thought about killing themselves. That's is wild. Staggering. Part of it is that we're trying to live up to an image that God never wants us to live up to. Right. And because that's killing us, literally killing us.
Yeah, that's wow. That's sad. Yeah. And you don't see that because, again, we see the shiny, they have a nice jacket, a nice suit, the pastor's up on stage. Oh, look, they're perfect. They have everything figured out. They're human. We're human. We don't. So to your point. So now in leadership, though, whether it's a pastor, a boss, or even a parent, people expect confidence. So like, how do you show weakness without losing someone's trust?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of people ask me that question. But what they don't realize is that when you study the brain, you realize that the brain is separated into two spheres, the right side, the left side. The right side where all the emotions live, the left side where all the information live. And what people don't realize in communicating, the left brain does not get stimulated until the right brain allows it to. So the right brain where all the emotions live is the gatekeeper to your left brain. And so what happens when you talk to doctors and psychiatrists, they're saying that when the best way for you to connect with people and for people to trust you is to connect them to your right brain first before you talk to them. That's why, like, sometimes you're in class in college and you're just like, this is the most boringest thing in the world. And you just won't listen anymore. You tune out because you're not connecting with the professor emotionally. But if they crack a joke and you start laughing, then you're all of a sudden focused and you actually listen to what they have to say. And you're like, oh, wow, this is actually very meaningful. The right brain is that gatekeeper. When you're vulnerable in any group setting and you're open, what the neuroscience community has discovered is that the right brain is stimulated. And then what happens is that you actually gain trust with that community. So sometimes we think, oh, if I share this, how are they going to trust me as a leader? It's the opposite. They actually will follow you more and they'll trust you more because you've actually been vulnerable. And because you've been vulnerable, they're like, I can follow this person and I can trust them. And I think
Yeah.
that's the most beautiful thing about this. And so it really sort of destroys or answers or takes care of some of these myths that we create in our culture today, where we're saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if this is going to make me look weak, and people are not going to trust me. I need to be confident as a leader." You're never more confident when you can actually share that you've messed up. Like that's true
Right.
confidence. But
Yeah.
you're not. I believe there's a cowardice to our society today because they just pretend to be strong and don't admit when you made a mistake. That to me is cowardice.
I agree.
Courage is when you can admit that you did
Yeah.
something wrong and take ownership of it and learn from it. That to me is
Right.
a beautiful thing. And you connect
Yeah.
with the people in which you share that with. They trust you more than
100%.
ever. Yeah.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. So wait, do you think though some people will actually use vulnerability as a strategy to manipulate and gain sympathy? And if so, how can you determine like what's
Sure.
real? Like how do you know when someone's trying to be a manipulative SOB or they're
Yeah.
just being genuine?
Another amazing question. I had a pastor who is this one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met. He actually asked that same question that you asked. And I looked at him and I just said, there's the difference between fake vulnerability and real vulnerability. People can fake things and they can be manipulative. But if you're really going to be vulnerable, it takes an immense, an extraordinary amount of courage to do that. That the last thing you think about is, can I get people to, can I manipulate people with this? That's a pretty dark place to be because to share, it's not easy to be vulnerable. There's nothing sexy about me going up and telling people that there was a season where I struggled and I want to commit adultery on my wife. There's nothing sexy about that. I don't want to share it, but part of it is that this is what God has called me to do, but also share how there's a redemptive side, what I learned. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is I encourage pastors who preach sermons, don't share anything that doesn't have a redemptive story to it, right? It's okay. It's important to share the Good Friday moments of your life. But if there's no Easter to it yet, then you're not ready to share it, right? And
Right.
so in a group setting like that, that's what I would say. Don't share until there's like a redemptive side to it. But to share Good Friday is very, very difficult. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to do. And the ones who actually do it for manipulation, my feeling is that they're not being really vulnerable. They're
Yeah.
faking vulnerability to try to manipulate people. So
Yeah. And
that's
people
not
can eventually, yeah, and people will eventually sniff that crap out. I mean, you
Oh,
can't,
absolutely. The young generation is way too smart to like
yeah.
fall for that.
Right.
They might
Yeah.
fall for it once, but they're not going to keep falling for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And if they're in a relationship with you, you should be vulnerable and be sharing things of different. If you're sharing one story about your life to everyone all the time, repeating that over
Right.
and over, there's a problem with that. And then you might be
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
it to
Yeah.
manipulate people. But you
Yeah.
should be growing and you should be open to sharing even current stuff that you're struggling with where God is doing a work in your life. So that
Yeah.
safeguards you, in
No.
my opinion.
Yeah, no, excellent. Yeah. So in closing though, if someone's watching this and they wanted to start being more open today, but they're scared, what's one small real step they could take without feeling exposed or, judged?
So a couple things I would give an answer to that. Number one, one way in how you can do that is you could probably go see a counselor and share. They will not go out and share with everyone of what you're doing. That's probably one of the safest ways. But I don't really feel like you can get full healing from that. I mean, you can get healing from
Right.
your past, but I would encourage you. What I encouraged you at the beginning of this episode is try to get together with one person. And if you go to my book, I have a chapter on soulmates, which is chapter 4. I
Yep.
actually give a nuts and bolts of how do you nurture a relationship where you can be really vulnerable and they can be vulnerable with you. And so I kind of go into step by step in how this is done. And I hope you can give it a shot. But my encouragement to you is find one person who you feel like has character and integrity. That's all you need, right? And ask them if they'd be willing to enter into a relationship with you where you can share this stuff, but also like this will be also reciprocal of what they will do as well. And that
Right.
you would be in a relationship with them for the long term, right? So my
Yeah.
soulmates are just as important as my children. And I
Right.
write that in the book. And if you're single, there's nobody, no other person in this world that's more important to you than your soulmate. It's not your parents.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not your sibling. It's not your
Yep.
nieces and nephew. It's your soulmate. And so that's how important these relationships are, because they give you permission to be imperfect, but then there is a power to that when you're willing to be that vulnerable with
Yeah.
someone. So that's what I would
Yeah.
encourage them to do, is to find somebody of the same sex to share that with. I think it will be great.
You know, yeah, and funny you mentioned that, because I don't know if you would agree with this, but us men tend to have a hard time with that. I think women are better at that, but us dudes, I don't know if it's homophobia or what, but it's just guys are, you know, like men rather die than try to be open with another
Right.
guy.
Men really struggle with this, but I would say women struggle with it more when they're in. So if we can get guys into the relationship, they don't struggle with it as much as women do. Women, what they've done over the years, in my experience, as I've been teaching this and coaching this to people, is that they do a great job of sharing, but they don't want any feedback, and they don't want to give feedback because they're
right. Got it. Yeah. Right. Hmm. Oh yeah. Hmm. Oh yeah. I'm gonna kill you. That's what I'm gonna do. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mutual assured destruction. Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. No, well said. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to add, Pastor Peter? Like I said, I definitely encourage people to go out and get the Weak Church book. I'm going to put the links below and stuff like that. But before we go, anything else? Any parting words? Yeah. 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 Right. 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 Yeah. 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 True. True. Yeah. Awesome. Well said, Pastor Peter. Thank you very much. Thanks for making the time. And everybody, tune back in. We've got some more great content. I'm going to sign us off in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Pastor Peter. Bye bye, everyone.